Hi, everyone. This is your co-host, Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist, the ghost lady of PA, Patty Wilson. Haven't said that one in a while, but
Well, how are you tonight, Stu?
I am doing very well. How are you?
I am peachy.
Good. Well, we apologize. We took a few weeks off. I still have a major project that I'm working on that has literally been taking every waking moment that I am not uh, working for my employer or maintaining a house and everything else. So it's been an interesting time, but we thank you for sticking with us. Here is a brand new episode. I still don't know what we're going to talk about, but she's going to tell me here in a second. If you are just joining us, you probably have no idea what I was just talking about, but thank you for finding us. If you are returning, you do know what I was talking about. And we thank you for coming back. We are back. Yay. And down in the description, you'll find everything Paranormalist Podcast related. Our email address, Facebook groups, Patty's blog, Buy Me a Coffee. The list is almost endless, but it ends at some point because we only have like 5,000 characters on both of
That's right.
the video platforms. So with that, I think I would say, what's our topic?
Well, cursed movies.
Okay, that conjures up quite a few that I know of that have had curses associated. So we'll see if you hit those.
I have to tell you, I went out of my way this time to
Mhm.
not do very many of, if any, of the ones that people know. Possibly one. I doubt more than that. So
Okay.
I was surprised at the number of movies that I'd never heard of that have weird stories behind them. So the
Mhm.
first thing I wanted to talk about was, it's not just movies. So the form of entertainment prior to movies were plays. And of course, you can't talk about this subject without at least talking a little bit about Macbeth, because Macbeth is infamous in the theater industry as the cursed play. So I sat out this time to find out why Macbeth's the cursed play. So basically what was going on at the time is that James VI of Scotland, he had, his mother had died a horrible, violent death. She was Mary, Queen of Scots. So anybody who's a history buff knows she lost her head. And it was not figuratively. And she was executed in 1587. And he believed that she had been cursed by witches because she had been so religious and had been going out of her way to get rid of them. So he has this kind of obsession with witchcraft and doing away with the witches. It gets compounded when he sails from Scotland to Denmark to pick up the woman who would become his wife. Her name is Anne. And on their way back home, there's this violent storm that comes out of nowhere and they almost die. And when he gets to the little town of North Berwick, which is where they end up putting in at to port, he decides that this was because the witches had set a spell on him as they had with his mother. And so he actually orders them to look for the witches in the area who might have done this thing. So fast forward, he writes this treatise on witchcraft and speaks out a lot about witchcraft and what have you. He becomes King James I of England in 1603, and everybody knows about how he has this thing about witchcraft and he wants to hunt down the witches and all of this. So when Dr. Faust comes in out as a play and what have you, then he's fascinated with it. It becomes very popular. Everybody's like on the bandwagon because you do not want to, pardon my French, piss off the king because he had ultimate power. So, hey, yeah, we're all into that same subject because he is. And we don't want anything to happen to us. So eventually, William Shakespeare releases in 1604, 1606, the play known as Macbeth. The basic gist of which is, of course, that that Macbeth and his wife murder the king, King Duncan, so that they can follow the lineage into the throne. And of course, it sparks a war and all these other things happen instead, and it becomes this horrible thing. there's a scene, Act 4, Scene 1, my favorite act of the play. And there are these witches called the Weird Sisters, who are like Stygian witches. And there's 3 of them. And there's a couple very unique quotes. The scene opens with the witches doing a spell over a cauldron, and it's double, double, toil and trouble, fires burning, cauldrons bubble. I'll spare you, but I know the entire act before scene. Just saying. I was a nerdy. That's what I did in my way to school, is I learned Shakespearean plays. So anyway, there are certain lines in the play that apparently offended the witches in the area and the wise women. So there's a line in it that says, fillet of fenny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake, eye of newt, toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard leg and howlet's wing, poor charm of powerful trouble, like a hell's broth boil and bubble. And yeah, I did that from memory, boys and girls. So anyway, those things are actually parts of different witch incantations, and he broke them apart and tucked them all together and made them into what we now see as that soliloquy. And the witches supposedly cursed him from that moment on, that this play would always bring nothing but strife. And that's the backstory as to what happened. Supposedly he engendered some camaraderie with witches, learned their secrets, took this material and used it to create all of this. And then they were angry. They felt used and betrayed.
Probably rightfully so.
Probably. So anyhow, Macbeth from the very beginning becomes this really dangerous play. The first performance, which was performed sometime in 1606, there was horrible disaster. Just minutes before the play goes on, Lady Macbeth is found dead in her room. So the legend is that Shakespeare himself donned her gowns and played the part, which that might sound really bizarre to us today, but a lot of plays were played, women were portrayed by men because women weren't supposed to be actresses. And so there were very few of them. So a lot of men played women's parts. So anyhow, supposedly Shakespeare donned the robes and became the Lady Macbeth. During that very same episode where the murder of King Duncan occurs, the actor who is supposed to murder him is handed a dagger, and he plunges it into King Duncan, which is exactly what happens in the written form of the play. The only problem is it wasn't a stage dagger. So he literally stabbed to death the man who played the part of King Duncan. It just goes on and on from there. Mishap after mishap after mishap. The play was an absolute failure. But it caught attention because it was about, it has a central theme of the witches and good versus evil and all of these things. So over the years, the play continued. I did not know how many crazy things happened around this play. In 1849, there's a riot called the Astor Place Riot in New York, where there were 2 particular theaters, both having this play. One was the Macbeth was being played by an American actor named Edwin Forrest, and there was a British actor by the name of William Macready, and they were both playing that part. I cannot understand how anybody would be this passionate about it, but I guess I look back at football people and I can see that they get this angry. So both of these groups of people who went to see their version of the play come out of the theater at approximately the same time. They're out on the street and they're like, oh, that was an amazing play. And they start talking, and it ends up, I kid you not, that like 20 people are murdered in the fight that ensues. There's riots, 100 people are injured, and all over this play. It's like it does something to people. I can't explain it. Throughout the years, there are just so many of these things. I'm going to kind of zip through the rest of them, but Sir Laurence Olivier, this is in 1937, he plays the part. Judith Anderson was supposed to be Lady Macbeth, and she dies literally on the stage of a heart attack. And then as they're trying to, muddle through this whole mess, a sandbag falls and nearly strikes Olivier. Had he been in the position he was supposed to be in and not have been like thrown off his game because there's Lady Macbeth dead on the stage, and so like he ran to help her, he would have been killed. And there's just like hundreds of these. There's another one where a lady actress, this was in like the 1948. There was an actress by the name of Diana Wynyard, and she had been asked about playing Lady Macbeth, and was she afraid of the curse? And she laughingly said to this reporter the night before, "There are no such things as curses, darling, just bad reviews." And the next night, as she's doing the sleepwalking scene, she decides that she needs to be more authentic about it. So she closes her eyes for a few seconds as she gets close to the end. And she had counted out her steps. She knew how far to go. She miscounted. She stepped differently. Something happened, and she ended up falling into the orchestra pit and dying. And there's like literally dozens and dozens of these stories. So long before there were movies, there were curses. Curses are just a part of the whole process. So I want to start with a film that William Shatner did before he became Captain Kirk. And the film is called Incubus. And in order to make sense out of this whole thing, this film was done in 1966, and it was a low-budget black and white kind of horror flick. Now, there was a guy that by the name of Zamenhof Esperanto. Esperanto was, he studied languages, and he had in 1887 created a language that was known as Esperanto.
For the UN.
Familiar
Yep.
with it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for those who aren't, he basically created a language that had no nationality. The idea behind it was that it was supposed to be a language that all the schools could teach in all the world, and it wouldn't have any attachment to any nationality, religion, anything that was you could fight over. So he wanted to teach this language, and so he created it. Now, here's the interesting part. The director decided that he wanted to do the entire movie in Esperanto. So William Shatner, none of them had ever heard of this language before. They had several weeks to learn it and learn all their lines that way. God bless them all.
Well, that's how Bela Lugosi, because he wasn't a native English speaker, he learned all his lines phonetically and repeated them out. So I'm wondering if they didn't do the same thing.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what they did. And they didn't have anybody there that knew the language to correct them. So it was a really, really bad version thereof.
There are no native speakers. Yeah.
Well, actually, there are a few now that have spoken it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so they do the movie, and and basically the gist of the movie is that Shatner and this female lead are going to this village where travelers use a magic well that has mysterious healing properties, and that Shatner's a wounded soldier, and he falls in love with this young lady who is a succubus, which is a sexual demon that would attach itself to a male. Throughout the movie, this character, her name is, the woman that plays the part is Anne Atmar. She does everything like it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong, but right after the movie is done, before it's even aired, she commits suicide. So she's the first casualty. A couple months later, Siberian actor who played the incubus role, the main character's role, because his name was Milos. I know that sounds crazy, but that's his name, Milos. And he was a Serbian actor. He gets caught having an affair with Mickey Rooney's wife and murdered himself and killed himself and murdered Mickey Rooney's wife in Mickey Rooney's bedroom. And then right after the movie's release, one of the other actresses, a lady by the name of Illinois Hart, her daughter is kidnapped and murdered. And here's something crazy. The people suspect, nobody ever caught the people, but it's always been believed that it might have been the very first Manson killing. And in fact, and here's another bizarre thing, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate attended the premiere of this particular movie.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
at that time. And this was less than a year before the Sharon Tate murder. So definitely Manson would have been in the area, all of this. It's just insane. The company that produced the movie went under. The music director got imprisoned for scalping tickets. And the prints of the movie were almost all destroyed by a fire. So there's only a few copies of it left. They end up in France, and apparently, and I have to say it doesn't shock me any, the French just found this entirely enchanting. So they hung on to these prints and they played them, and it became a cult classic in France. So in 1993, Anthony Taylor, who's the producer of old movies, he would take old movies and then like remaster them and then put them out for direct sale on DVD. He wanted to get a copy of this movie so he could do this, and he could not find a single copy anywhere. So eventually a friend of his said, go to France. There's a few damaged copies. Maybe you could put one together from that. And that's what he does. So he puts it together and he offers it on DVD in like 2001. And you can buy it, by the way, on Amazon for anybody who's curious. I checked.
Pass.
So yeah, so when it comes out, now William Shatner, he's a Star Trek guy. He's got all this money, his fame, and all this. And in a book he wrote in 2011, it's called Shatner Rules. He writes about that movie and about everything that happened and how it was such a creepy experience in his life. And he said that he was actually threatened by a group of Esperanto aficionados because he spoke the language so badly, and that he felt that movie had done nothing but curse him. So he destroyed every copy of the film he could find. And he said, I don't ever want anyone to see that. It's the most awful thing, and it never does anything but brings people terrible luck. And he went back to the fact that almost every one of the co-stars and some of the staff of the movie had all these horrendous things happen to them within months of the movie before it even got released in some cases. And he's like, there's just too many coincidences. It was just a bad movie from the very beginning. It was a bad subject. We shouldn't have been doing it. The hero of the whole thing's an incubus. He's like, it was just something I shouldn't have been involved in.
Well, it didn't affect. I mean, he's in his 90s now, so
He is.
he hasn't. Evidently hasn't cursed him that much. You'd think of it, his stilted delivery would have done something for his career other than that. But
well, I mean, I guess he got lucky, but he truly believed that like it doesn't make sense that so many bad things would happen in such a short period of time. And everybody that starred in the movie who played the titular roles except for him were dead in weird circumstances. So we're going to move on to another movie, and it's called Stalker. This was done in 1979. It was done in it was a Soviet film, written and directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. And it's a bizarre story about two men going through something that the movie calls the zone, to a mysterious closed off place where there's all these supernatural paranormal things going on. And if you can get through these events, you can make it to the room, which is where they're told that their deepest desires will be fulfilled. They'll get everything they've ever wanted. A lot of people say it's a metaphor for the Soviet Union, and the lies of the Soviet Union, that if you can make it through all the terrible things that happened and what have you, you get to this place where everybody's equal, and this, socialism and communism are this equaling force, but you find out that the whole thing's a lie, because in the movie it's all a lie. So you could see where it could be metaphorical for communism. He was very anti-communism. He died very shortly after the movie came out from a strange, bizarre cancer. There's some speculation he had shot the movie in old abandoned like electrical plants and what have you. Like he needed that setting of old abandoned empty buildings. And they're down below the one chemical or the one hydroelectric plant he had been using. There was a chemical factory that they later found out had been dumping pollutants into the river for years, and most likely the staff had been absorbing them. The other, then, and that's believed to possibly be why he and a lot of the actors and the staff ended up dying of this bizarre cancer within months of the end of the movie. The other theories are that the KGB poisoned him because they didn't want his message to come out, like they got the metaphors of the movie kind of a deal, and they didn't like it. And he had actually been seeking to flee the country for Western Europe to get away from the Soviet Union. But, you know, whatever it was, it's a very dark movie and it's a very heavy movie. And the people that made it, that survived, talked about there was a desperation, there was a feeling that what they were doing was really life and death. And they say they didn't know that it was metaphorical, that they just thought it was a creepy movie. But a lot of the staff, like somewhere near 90 people died within weeks and months, between weeks and months of the end of that movie before it was ever released. So it was just a really, really weird movie. And so the next movie I want to talk about is called Fitzcarraldo. Fitzcarraldo is actually based on a true story. So there's this German-Irish entrepreneur and music lover. This movie's made in 1982, and in this movie, this guy is living in early 20th century Peru. He's obsessed with making a fortune out of the rubber business in Peru, not because he wants money, but because he wants to build this great big opera house for his mistress, who he wants to impress. She's very well-to-do because she runs a bordello. Okay, she bankrolls him because he convinces her, this is the true story, he convinces her that if he can get into this inaccessible area where all these rubber trees are that nobody's ever touched, because you got to go over a mountain, there's no railroad, there's no shipping lane, there's no access and egress from it. Once you get in there, that he can do this, he can figure it out. So he actually tears apart a 30-ton steamship and has native people haul it over the mountain to the other side, to another river, and recreate it. Now, the bizarre part about this is that, like, he doesn't pay very well, but he literally enchants them by letting them watch movies and hear music and what have you. And they think he's some sort of a wonderful god because he can produce pictures on the side of the mountain and he can do all these things. So they do it, and like a lot of them die in the process. Because you can imagine, it's a 30-ton ship, dude. Nothing about that ship's little. So that's the true story. So this movie's loosely based on that. And the craziest part of the whole thing is that the actors talk about the feeling of this movie. That's really interesting. It was the one thing that sort of stayed with all these. Like, there was something really wrong. So the first person who was supposed to play the part of the lead for the movie, he gets dysentery and he has to go home. Okay. And the doctor tells him he can't. He just simply can't. So then he hires this other guy whose name is Klaus Kinski. Now, Klaus Kinski and this director had made 4 other movies together, and they didn't really like each other, but they worked well together. And Klaus Kinski had his nose out of joint because, like, dude, you offered it to an American actor before you offered it to me, and I've done 4 movies with you. Well, screw you. So the whole way through the movie, he's making all these noises about how, hey, I can just walk off this movie any old time and you're stuck. You're screwed, dude. And like, he just made life miserable for everybody. But the most bizarre thing about this is that the director literally brought, I kid you not, I can't even imagine, but it's true. He literally brought a 30-ton steamship and forced the native people to move it en masse as one unit over a mountain so he could film how dangerous and painful it was. The guy's name was Werner Herzog. He literally did that. The stories of their deaths and all the different ways that they died and, crushed and what have you, literally. And then to add to that, bizarre things like one of the actors had to cut his own foot off because he got bit by a snake and he couldn't get out of there in time, and had the blood, the venom spread, it would have killed him. He had to cut his own foot off. Others, like, they died in just really bizarre ways. And it's like the craziest thing I ever saw in my life. It's just insane what they went through. Literally, there were skirmishes. The encampment where they had all the actors got burned down by warring factions. Indigenous people were injured and killed. Herzog was, he didn't seem even like he knew, like he cared. Like, he would write about, 5 people died today in his journal. And he would be like, but tomorrow we're going to do this. It was like a man possessed. I don't know how else you could explain it. And it went down in history as like one of the creepiest, strangest, most bizarre movies of all time. And I just thought it was like, everybody said he was possessed. It was though this other guy possessed him to tell his story again, and nothing could change this guy's mind.
Wow. And I've seen him in other things. I mean, he also acted. I've seen him in a few things. Same thing with Klaus Kinski. I've seen him in things as well. Never knew this one though. I'm gonna have to. But that is just so bizarre. I mean, forcing, my goodness, a 30-ton
steamship over a mountain.
Piece of equipment over a mountain. That's just I'm flabbergasted about that.
I looked at the stills as I was doing the research. Like, there's a series of stills, and it's insane. I mean, it was like 40 men, pulling from the top of the mountain, and 40 more pushing, and people along the sides pulling ropes. And I mean, there had to be 100 people in some of those pictures trying to do this, and they're manhandling 30 tons over a mountain. Obviously, there's things shoring it up underneath, and if something slipped, those people behind were dead. It's just a bizarre story. And the part that I found the most interesting is those who knew him said he became a man possessed. It was as though this was his life's work to tell this bizarre, unusual story. And when people would point out, well, look, they didn't bring the ship across the first time in, one piece. They tore it apart at least and drug it across in pieces, which were more manageable. He was like, but this is how he should have done it. We should have done it that way. Like, it was crazy. So it's a fascinating story though to read. So the next one is Maximum Overdrive. This was Stephen King's directorial debut and his last movie he ever directed. Mm-hmm. And that's for a lot of reasons. So King would eventually say that it was because he was on cocaine that he couldn't manage the directing of this movie, and he did a really bad job. It ended up that somebody else in the movie ended up taking over and like making a lot of the decisions that King should have made. But the actors who worked there it started out badly. So Stephen King walked in and he was full of himself. And he tells them, I want Bruce Springsteen to be the truck driver. That's the main lead in the movie. Mm-hmm. And the director, the other guy that was working with the director, he's like, who the hell is Bruce Springsteen? Like, he didn't know who he was, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, no. I know Martin Sheen. We'll call Emilio Estevez. That's Sheen's son. He's a good actor. He's young. He's hungry. We'll get him. And that made King mad because King really wanted to direct Bruce Springsteen for some bizarre reason. And everybody said he kind of like got really pissy afterward. So whenever Emilio Estevez and all of the others get in there, they start shooting the movie, and just crazy stuff starts to happen. Things like the actors would talk about, we would have this feeling as though somebody was going to die. We were always talking among ourselves saying, there's something wrong with this movie. There's a darkness to it. Somebody's going to die. A cinematographer that was working there, his last name was Armando Nuzizi. I hope if I pronounced it wrong, sorry. If any people, I promise. Nanzuzi, maybe. Anyway, he had a horrific injury during production. A lawnmower. This is bizarre. This is like Stephen King bizarre. Okay, a lawnmower scene. There's this lawnmower scene where the lawnmower turns itself on, push mower, right? And it's spinning along like doing its thing, because the premise of the movie is that all the machines animate themselves and become have control. And they're holding these people hostage to kill them. Now we become servants to the machines instead of machine servants to us. For those who have never seen the movie, that's the premise. So this lawnmower is set up to go, and it's remote controlled, the whole 9 yards. That's basically what it was. And no big deal. We've had remote control cars for at least the 60s, 50s, something like that. But this mower, they lose control of it. Okay? Like something out of the movie. It hits a block of wood, and a splinter, huge hunk of wood, flies out from under it and strikes that poor man in his right eye. Now tell me that's not bizarre.
I can't tell you that. It sounds bizarre.
It is bizarre. It's insane. Hurricane Gloria was happening at the time. They end up getting stuck there. And, it was just really one thing after another. People were getting injured all the time. There was always this sense of feeling that somebody was going to die. Somebody was going to die. They were talking about it all the time. They were saying all the time, be careful, be careful. There's something wrong with this movie. There's just something wrong. There's just something wrong. And more people get injured. There's one of the stunt drivers gets injured. There's this scene, everybody's seen the scene with the weird clown-like demon face on the truck, the green face on the truck,
Yep.
the rig. Okay, there's supposed to be this scene where somebody gets, they dive away from it, and just as the truck's going to hit them, kind of a deal. And somebody got injured badly doing that. Somebody got in that, and they brought another stuntman in. He got injured, and it just went on and on and on. And King just at one point just kind of goes, "Oh well, I quit," and just leaves them hanging. And they finish out the movie. What they talk about, said, it just didn't. I didn't know what to do. I just quit and left them hanging there. And then the movie gets finished, but. It's just some of the crazy stuff, like the lawnmower scene. I never knew that.
Well, if there was ever a curse, up until I think the most recent iteration of It, and now It Too, that his books typically did not translate well into cinema. It was just bad. Yeah.
Well, it's because King writes, and I would only get into a writing class, but King writes by highlighting tiny, tiny details and painting a painting with a bazillion little strokes, which he's phenomenal at doing. But
yeah, he and Tolkien should have gotten together. Yeah.
Yeah. He can't, it's not easy to tell those stories because they're great big overarching themes, but in order to understand them, you've got to understand all the nuances behind it. And you can't, like The Stand, it's a mini series that's 18 hours long or something. And you still, if you're watching it with somebody who never read the book, they're like, why did he do that? What's he talking about there? Because there's so many tiny details, you can't get them all in. And that's why he doesn't translate well to cinema. But it's, that said, this is just a bizarre story. But they're going to get stranger, and if you stick with me, I promise you the craziest story I've ever told is coming up.
That's a bold statement.
Oh, it is. I'm telling you, it's bizarre. Even for me, I was like, ooh, that's cool. So check it out. It's coming right up here in a few minutes.
Okay.
So the next one is The Omen. So for many people, The Omen's an old movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it starred Gregory Peck, as he's an older man. The idea of the movie is that the Antichrist is born to this diplomat and his wife.
Lee Remick, is that who it was?
Yep, Lee Remick. Mm-hmm. So it that's just kind of, it goes from there. As the child grows, he begins to realize who he is and what he is and all of this. So let's start. Flying to the site to start shooting. The scriptwriter, David Seltzer's plane is hit by lightning. Gregory Peck is on another plane, hit by lightning. And the executive producer, Max Neufeld, is on another plane, hit by lightning at the same time.
Well, if they're all flying through the same electrical storm, maybe, because planes get hit by lightning a lot more than what you'd think.
But I mean, what's the odds 3 of them at one time, right?
I've
Going
never
to the,
calculated them.
but it's got to be weird. So they get there. Now, as soon as they land on the ground in Ireland, which is where they shot this, okay, the IRA blows up the hotel they're supposed to be in. Not only they blow up the hotel, but the people were out at dinner and the restaurant they were at blew up. I don't even know what to say about that. On Friday, the 13th of August of 1976, a gentleman by the name of John Richardson, who was one of the assistants for the special effects, he was a consultant, was going along trying to, set up stuff and get the pre-stuff done for this shoot when, and he's in Holland because they're going to move some of the shots to Holland because Ireland's literally blowing up around them. So they thought maybe we'll just change it. So he's over there with his assistant and they're driving along in a car and there is a crash and the assistant is cut in half behind the steering wheel. The steering wheel comes off and shears through the human being to the other side. He climbs out of the wreckage, this Richardson, who was in the passenger seat. And, I can't even imagine how horrified he was and traumatized he was. And he's not sure if this other person's alive or dead at this point. And he looks up and he says the first thing he saw was a sign and it said OMMEN 66.6 kilometers. Omen, 66.6 kilometers. For coincidences, that's one heck of a coincidence. Now, if that's not bad enough, the film's there's a scene in there with the taggers. There's a tagger handler. And he gets killed in a freak accident. Gregory Peck's son shoots himself, and Peck has to leave the film for a while because of all of this. A plane scheduled to be used in the film was rescheduled and used for a commercial flight instead, and it crashed and killed everybody on board. Peck and all of them should have been on that plane. A stuntman that worked on the Omen later hospitalized himself right at the end of the movie as he started to work on a bridge too far. He said, everything around me was just creepy. Just creepy. I didn't know what to do. You could feel there was a bad energy there. You could feel we had opened up a door to something we didn't understand, and I needed to get away from it. While he's in the hospital, he climbs out of his room and throws himself off the roof.
Oh, how about that? The scene in The Omen where
Exactly.
all for you, Damien.
It's all for you, Damien.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. That was The Nanny, wasn't it?
Yep, The Nanny.
Okay. Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie.
Yep. How that movie, you could say that movie's not cursed. I don't know. I mean, I've never heard anything quite like it. It just seemed that anything that could go wrong did go wrong. So we're now down to our last couple ones. So the next one is, it's called The Innkeepers. It's a more modern movie. Now, The Innkeepers is basically about these two people who keep an inn in New England. It's shot at a place called the Yankee Peddler Inn. And the idea behind it is that they know that the place is haunted, that they encountered a lot of stuff over the years they've worked there. And in the last week before they close, they don't really have a whole lot to do. I mean, it's not like you're going to have to, clean stuff for the staff, for people coming in, because this is your last week. You're just sort of shutting everything down. They decide they're going to document the paranormal stuff so that they can prove what they've been saying. And that's the premise for the beginning of the movie. Okay. Now, the interesting part about this is it was actually shot at a haunted hotel. So what had happened was that the gentleman who directs the movie, his name is, I apologize, Ty West, had been at the hotel with pretty much the same staff of actors and background staff to shoot another movie. And they had stuff going on while they were there. So he gives him this idea to come back with the same group of people, basically, and shoot another movie, which becomes The Innkeepers. And he talks about, they stayed at the end, at least at the beginning. And, there's a quote here. It says, it all started off kind of goofy, but it became this thing where most of the cast and crew started to think there was something up at the hotel. This is West talking. He says, the staff at the hotel believed it was haunted. The whole town believed it was haunted. It's haunted. So it had kind of a mystique. And as they're going along, he says, he says later on, I'm a skeptic. I don't really buy it, but I definitely have seen doors close by themselves. I've seen a TV turn on and off by itself. Lights would turn on and burn out in my room. Everyone on the crew had vivid dreams every night, which was really strange. And then he goes on to document all this other stuff that happened, right? Like the staff got so frightened that by what was going on that they moved out of the hotel and at their own expense moved into another hotel where the dead people weren't waking them up in the middle of the night because they kind of like not having that happen.
I can see that.
Yeah, he says there was an actress, her last name's Paxton, and he said they actually some of the crew members and cast became so scared they actually started staying in another hotel, including Paxton. After staying for one night, the atmosphere of the place became of interest to her, and she helped to add an odd, spooky feel to the film itself. But she did leave the hotel at night to go to sleep in one that wasn't haunted, because that's a little much. And he just talks about there was a sense of dread, and it was more terrifying as the days went on. It was as though they were waking up something, as though something was feeding them and giving them more of what they wanted, step by step. The more they would shoot, the more active it would become. It was like it was performing for them. And he believed that the movie had a bad energy about it. And just to kind of like tell you a little bit about the hotel. So the hotel was built in 1891. It was built in Torrington, Connecticut. It was called the Conley Hotel for many years, owned by the Conley family. And people in the town talked about it being, haunted by Mr. Conley and different people and guests who had died there of heart attacks and things like that throughout the years. It had a really big reputation. In 1956, it was sold to somebody else who called it the Yankee Peddler Inn. And it was, getting ready to close down. So at that time, and that's whenever the two movies come up. Just a very, very odd story. So now we're down to my last two, I believe. So there's a script. It's not a movie, and there's a reason it's not a movie. It's called Atuk, and Atuk is based on a book called The Incomparable Atuk by Mordecai Richler. It's it's a comedy about an Inuit Eskimo man who finds himself a stranger in New York City and awkwardly is trying to adjust. Okay, so it's a lot of fun. A screenplay was written by Todd Carroll in the early 1980s, and nobody will touch it now because of what happened. So here we go. John Belushi, who was at the height of his career at the time, is offered the title role. In fact, Todd Carroll would say he wrote the entire script praying that Belushi would be the one, because that's who he had in his head when he wrote it. Okay. Belushi loved the script and said he was going to do it. And as soon as he got ready to sign the paperwork, he died of an overdose at the age of 33. Then the script is pitched to Sam Kinison.
I see where this is going.
Who manages to shoot one scene. Then for some reason, everything goes awry. He gets angry. He says things need to be rewritten. He can't handle it. And he's leaving the production for a few weeks to calm down and dies in a head-on collision in 1992 while on hiatus from shooting it. He shot one scene. Then it goes to John Candy, who has the script when he is struck down with a heart attack at the age of 43. And it was still in his possession when his body was found. Not only that, but a friend of his, a writer by the name of Michael McDougall, who reportedly had read the script with Candy, died of a blood hemorrhage right after that. And I'm not even anywhere near done.
Oh, no.
Chris Farley from Saturday Night Live
Mhm.
gets the script. They offer him the role. He thinks it's a great role. His hero is John Belushi. He is going to make the movie that Belushi died before he could make. This is his theory. He gives a copy of the script to Phil Hartman, who wants to play one of the backup roles.
Oh my.
Okay. Farley dies of an overdose, and Hartman's wife shoots him. And they both had the script in their possession. After that, pretty much nobody wanted to do it. So Steven Soderbergh, who had worked on getting this film put together, have pitched it to Will Ferrell, Jack Black, just other actors who've like, nah. Every time anybody looks at this movie, bad crap happens. I think I'm going to pass. That's a lot of people.
Well, then Sonderberg would have had to have read it too. Huh.
He must have read it, or he's at least associated with it in some way. He said, Steven Soderbergh was asked about it. And he said, I believe that movie is actually cursed. He said, it's in hopeless limbo despite all efforts to make it. Nobody's willing to touch it.
And so he did Men in Black, yeah,
Yes.
amongst others, but yeah.
But it wasn't that one. So now we come to my piece de resistance. So there's this movie called The Return to Babylon. Now, Babylon is a euphemistic term for the early silent films. And there's a guy by the name of Katawati who in the late 1990s, early 2000s, walking home one night from work, he comes across a garbage bag. It's nighttime, and there's this garbage bag lying along the sidewalk. And he opens the garbage bag, which that's not a habit he's in. This is in Los Angeles, and it's on the way to his car. It's laying on the sidewalk, like it's in his path, on his way to his car. So he picks the bag up and then decides to open it up and see what's in it. In it is a case of never opened black and white film. 19 rolls, still sealed in the original packaging. That's unheard of. He knows he's got to find of some sort. And then that moment, Return to Babylon is born. He has original vintage, never exposed film. He knows how to get a hold of a camera with the hand crank thing. It would be an original camera.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to tell the story using modern actors dressed as and acting the parts of all these famous film stars from the silent movie era and their tragedies. So he's going to talk about Valentino. He's going to talk about, Paul Byrne, all of these people who had tragic, bizarre lives, right? And he can envision this whole thing. So he goes ahead and he hires actors. This is what he does. He's a director. He sets the scripts, using documentation of what really happened in their lives. He picks actors and actresses that really look the part, and he films all of this using that old film that does that glitchy, jerky movements, how the film was back then. And he goes one more step. He literally goes to the homes of these silent film actors and records this stuff in their homes.
That's dedication.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what ends up happening is they have this, I think it's a 70, 75 minute, something like that movie when it's all cut. As they're looking at the rushes are the daily things they're shooting, right? And they're looking at the long pieces of film. They realize they're seeing crazy stuff in the movie. People's noses start growing. Hands elongate. People show up that weren't part of the team. Now, this guy's not rich. Like I actually heard an interview with him when I was doing the research, and he's talking about how he didn't know sometimes where he was going to sleep at night or what he was going to eat because he had put every penny he had into this movie. He had convinced Jennifer Tilly, Maria Alonso, Ion Sky, Debbie Mazur, Laura Herring, and Tippi Hedren to star in this movie. Okay, he was representing in the movie Valentino, Gloria Swanson, Clara Bow, Lupe Velez, Fatty Arbuckle, and William Desmond Taylor. And if for anybody has not got any clue about what these people's lives were like, yeah, look them up. Because I'm telling you, they're insane. It's the most bizarre movie. Like, I have watched sections of this movie where they didn't cut out. Like, he has the rushes from the stuff he cut out, and he shares it on different platforms. And he's like, look at this. People are running, and all of a sudden a woman has a beard, and her face starts to shift and melt and morph. And the technical term for that is morphing. And it's a more modern technique. It's a very, very expensive technique to do. Again, he's on a shoestring, okay? So he begins to see this stuff, and he starts thinking, this is insane. I can't believe what I'm seeing. I'm seeing entities appear out of nowhere, running down. There's this one scene, it looks like it's in a yard or a cemetery or something, and there's this figure who's running, and there's people chasing. But between the people chasing and this figure, two other figures suddenly appear. One is hooded, carrying something over its shoulder, and the other one is a woman with a headdress like Mary Magdalene would have worn, wrapped around her. Very 1920s kind of a look. And they just kind of come out of nowhere, and they come into the frame, and then they're just gone. And they're extremely solid. In fact, he had a friend who was a photography teacher at the Brooks Institute of Photography. And he said, he took it to him and he said, I need to know, is there any explanation? He's like, the film, he wanted to know if, like, was the film warped in some way? Was there something else that was going on? Was there a problem with the camera? He took everything over and he just said to him, figure it out. So his friend from the Brooks Institute actually came forward and said, this breaks all the rules of cinematic logic. I can find nothing wrong with the film. I can find nothing wrong with the camera. I can't explain this process. And if you morph, then there's a signature in the video itself that tells us that this was a morphed piece of footage because of the process it has to go through to get there. And it's not there. And paranormal experts have become really interested in this particular piece of this footage because there's so many things happening. Like, there's this, it's really hard to explain it. So what Stu and I have talked about, so everybody knows, is that I'm going to send you some stills from it with credit to the appropriate people. And I would like to let people be able to come on and see them, or like I'm not sure if you're watching it in a video format, you can see it. If not, can we also post them like with this episode so people can go on and click them?
Oh, yeah, we put links like that all the time in the description. So yeah, I can actually link to the original places, which then typically I don't have to worry about any kind of copyright information.
Yeah.
Copyright
It's
infringement.
just, yeah, it's just really bizarre. Now, I don't want to say I some of the stuff, I watched all of it. I watched 20 some minutes of it. And like, there was a couple places where he's like, oh, that woman has a beard. It could very well be shadow, and she had dark hair. Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate on those ones. But there are other things, like the fingers get like really super long and pointy, noses that kind of grow out of nowhere, faces that become all over the place. There's one where there's a woman's face and she's got her head back and she's screaming. It very much reminds me of a double exposure. You know how in the old film you would take a picture and maybe if you moved it at the last second, it would get like that wonky two sets of eyes and two mouths, and maybe that's sort of what that looks like.
But you'd see kind of a smear,
yeah,
if something was in motion at least. But
anyhow, so if you want to play devil's advocate, some of those pictures you could possibly pass off that way. And these are single frames from the film. So when you watch the film itself, it's just going really fast. But he actually takes you through in the piece I was watching, and he clicks them one by one so you can see them as they're moving forward. And how, you know, 1 second it looks like a girl, the next second there's this huge mass on its blackness on its face, and then the next second it's, you know, 3 frames further in, it's not there anymore. But when I told you this is the most bizarre story I've heard, this is one of the most bizarre stories I've heard, because everything seems so preordained in this story. Like,
Yeah. Who just happens upon a case with 19 reels in it?
yeah, in the original box, never opened, laying on the sidewalk where you have to walk to get to your car, and you pick it up and go, ooh, that's heavy. I wonder what's in there. I'm going to open up the garbage. And then as he's looking at the film, this whole thing happens. He believes that it is, that something was happening throughout the film. So some of the actors and actresses did talk about things like feeling as though somebody was touching them, pulling on them, they were bumping into people, and then there'll be nobody there, particularly when they were shooting in the houses. You know what I'm saying? So I believe Jennifer Tilly's the one that really got freaked out. She said that when she was doing her scenes in this one house, she could feel somebody grab her arm, somebody touch her neck, touch her face, push her, things like that. And she was really freaked out. Others talked about how suddenly they were, I hesitate to use the word possessed, but something came over them. And they just knew, like, it didn't happen quite that way. It happened a different way. And whenever, slightly different, you know what I'm saying, than what it was written. And they would say, they would just go with it. And then he would go, what are you doing? And you're like, this is how it really happens. He'd go back and he'd look. And this is how it really happened.
Yeah. And this is a bizarre story.
I'm totally enthralled because I love weird. I'm flummoxed. Like, you know, this was set out to be. So if you go to look it up, it's a 2013 film. It's really interesting to watch because the storylines are so interesting, and it's shot as a silent film. It's got all kinds of weird, critical acclaim. But he said the very first time he looked through the rushes, he began to see the faces, he began to see the figures, he began to see the morphing of things, and then he's like, oh crap. And then as it went on, film after film, but it's perfectly good in 90% of it. It's just in these bizarre moments, it just suddenly happens. So that is my last cursed story. I think he was chosen to tell their story and make them relevant again because they are cursed to stay here because of what they did when they were alive. They can't finish their business. They're movie stars. And just so people know, people don't realize this, but I've been doing a lot of deep diving on other subjects. Everything about Hollywood, including the name Hollywood, by the way, actually come from the gods and the goddesses, the demigods and goddesses. They were celebrated in a place called Hollywoods. They were called the stars of Hollywoods. They believed themselves to be better than, bigger than, beyond the norm in every way. And I could go into 30 other references, but I'll spare you. But I think there's some really hanky crap going on here, guys.
Agreed.
It's a weird story.
And see, I thought you were going to delve into some of the more common ones, but then I think, that's not your style. But things like The Exorcist or Poltergeist, or even what was the one where they were filming and there was like an image of someone standing behind a curtain? Was that Look Who's
that was
Talking?
Three Men
Three
and
Men
a
and
Baby.
Baby. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 Men and a Baby. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I kind of looked at all of them and I went, nah, that's passe. That's passe. I want some really weird crap.
Oh, like even something like The Crow.
They're all great stories. I mean, if I would have, one that I honestly thought about telling was the DC Comics, the Superman curse and the curse of the Joker. Because I'm telling you what, if you look at what the story of the Joker, That's insane how many people have said they've been possessed, by the joke, by that character. And I mean, it's a character. I get it. It's not a real person. So how can
Hmm.
it possess you? But something recognizing itself as that could, Jack Nicholson, played that part in 1989. And when he heard that Heath Ledger was going to play it, he said, he warned him not to take the part because he almost died he said, this thing took me over. This being took me over. And when Heath Ledger took the part, the
Hmm.
people who knew him and stuff said that he changed. He changed significantly. He would tell everybody he was in character, and that becomes interesting later on. He was in character, so he acted like the Joker all the time. He would, excuse me, he would stay away from everybody. He would talk with this really weird Joker voice, the whole 9 yards, right? And he began to get distant, more and more distant. Now, officially, he died of a drug overdose, and he was having mental health issues and personal issues and what have you. And when Nicholson heard it, he said, when they told me that of Heath Ledger's death, and about the role, my quote was, well, I did warn him. And then the last thing Heath Ledger did, he scrawled the words bye bye in a notebook next to a picture of himself when he was done up with the costume, the makeup. And if that was it, it would just be a weird, sad, terrible story. But Ledger's not the only one. Um, there were other people that were killed during the shooting and all of that. But then there were other actors. Joaquin Phoenix played the part. He talked about how it overtook him and he almost died from the part. He became crazy. And he couldn't control himself. And there's a guy by the name of he said, this is Joaquin Phoenix before I leave him. He said, I took the role. He said, I had gone slightly mad from the role and the weight loss that was involved. It was a role that scared the effing out of me. And then Jared Leto played the Joker in the Suicide Squad. And he said that he went through mental and emotional turmoil while playing the part. He said he spent most of his time feeling like he had to stay in the character. And he would spend the majority of his time in his dressing room shunning people. He didn't want to talk to the cast. He didn't want to talk to the crew. He just wanted to be left alone. He even did demented things, such as sending a rat to his co-star Margot Robbie and dead pigs to the rest of the cast. He later claimed he wasn't sure why he had done those things, and he felt that the role had, in a sense, possessed him.
That's just too bizarre for words.
It is. So that was the only other one I was thinking of telling. I obviously just told it, but
Yeah.
but and then if you could go on, there's others. I mean, like I think the Superman curse is insane. There's how many people have died because of that. It's just interesting. But those are the stories I chose for tonight. I wanted something different because we haven't been here for a month, and I wanted you to walk away going, dude, that was worth sitting over there and listening to.
All right. Well, thank you for all of those. I was highly entertained through this whole thing, enraptured, I could even say. So, because film is one of those things that I enjoy film.
Well, I
Yeah.
have to tell you, I'm going to be looking up some of these movies and trying to slog through a couple of them because I'm pretty sure like the one with the ships and all that.
Hmm.
Whew.
I'll be doing the same. And well, I won't be looking for Incubus, but I'll check out the Innkeepers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm planning to kind of maybe next weekend or so watch it whenever I get a chance to and see what it's like.
Yeah, in
But
my otherwise copious spare time. Yeah.
as is mine,
Yeah, that was
But
the
yeah.
sarcasm as far as you can get, but yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna try to anyway. I don't watch much TV. I probably watch less than an hour a week, but I'll make an exception and sit down for an hour and a half for one of them.
Alrighty. Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you and good night.
Good night to you and to everybody listening. Thank you for coming back and listening to us. We appreciate it.